Good morning, fellow Bible readers. I'm Janice. Today's January 3rd, and our reading was Genesis 8 through 11. Yesterday we ended with Noah and the animals safely in the ark as the waters were rising, and the only life that remained at this point was safely in the ark. By the way, if you get a chance to go to the Ark Encounter in Williamstown, Kentucky, it is so worth it. Ken Ham is the man behind creating that and making it available. He has a ministry called Answers in Genesis, which is a great resource to just learn more about the reality of these events. This was not just fables or myths. These things really did happen. So we start out in Genesis 8 today, and it says, "But God remembered Noah and the beasts." He didn't just leave them on the ark. He remembered, and he caused a wind to pass over and begin to dry the land. And it took some time. In fact, it was a year, a month, and 10 days before they got off the ark and were able to step out on dry ground. And the first thing that Noah did was build an altar and offer sacrifices out of gratitude for God saving him. So what I see in this is God remembers. He doesn't leave us alone in our struggles. He remembers, and he has a plan. And Noah responded with worship. Then we also see later in chapter 8 how God told Noah, he gave him a promise that he would never again curse the ground because of man's evil heart and never again destroy every living thing. And he's kept that promise. We can trust him. In Genesis 9, we see that God blessed Noah and his family, just like we saw with Adam and Eve in creation. He told them to go out to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And he also declared that every moving thing that is alive shall be food for you, as well as the plants. And then in verse 9, he established a covenant with Noah and his descendants. And he said, the sign of this covenant is going to be the rainbow after every storm, to remind us of his promise that he will never again flood the whole earth to destroy all the flesh. Then we see that Noah lived 350 more years before he died at the age of 950. Amazing. And then in Genesis 10, we're introduced to Noah's three sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And we learn about their descendants and how people multiplied over the next 300 plus years into people groups that had their own land and families, and they would separate out. But we also see in chapter 11, verse 1, that God makes a point that even though all these people have separated out, they have the same language, and they decide to move to the plain of Shinar, which is currently the country of Iraq. And these people decided to build a city for themselves. They decided to build a tower called Babel, and they were going to make a name for themselves. This tower would go to heaven, and it was another time where man is turning away from God and turning to himself, and God did not allow that. So he scattered them, and he confused their languages so that now they spoke different languages and couldn't understand each other. They spread out across the earth. And that's how we end with chapter 11. Just a quick recap. We've had 4 key events happen in these 11 chapters of the opening of God's Word. We have creation, where he created us in his image, and his first response to us was to bless us. And then we have the fall that happened in chapter 3, and we see how man and woman turned away from trusting the truth of God to the lie of the serpent. And that brought a death in their relationship with God, a separation from him, And we call that the fall, where we were no longer in fellowship with him. And then we have creation, the fall. We have the flood, which we've just read through about Noah and how God gave a covenant promise to never flood the earth again. And he's kept that promise. And then we have in chapter 11, the Tower of Babel, where he thwarted man's efforts to unify and lift themselves up as making a name for themselves. And he says, nope, not going to happen. So what do we see about God so far in his word? What he's shown me is that he is God and there is no other. We see that believing lies separate us from the truth of who he is, and that yet his heartbeat is to redeem. He gave us a promise in Genesis 3:15 that he would send a redeemer. He brought the judgment for the wickedness in the flood, and yet through that judgment, it also brought salvation for those who trusted him. Through the ark, they were saved by being lifted above the judgment and being in the ark. He keeps his promises. He does not break them. And any of our efforts are never going to derail his purpose to redeem us. What a comfort, what an anchor, knowing God to be this trustworthy, this solid, this firm in his resolve of wanting to draw us back to himself. That blesses my heart and gives me strength for the day, knowing that I can trust him. I'm grateful for his word, and I'm grateful that we can come to know him through it. Blessings to you on your day, and we'll connect again for the next chapter in our journey.